All
Great.
right. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I have been so excited to lead this session, and this session is on fatigue management for dysautonomia. I'd love to share a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Lian. My pronouns are she, her, and I am an occupational therapist, and I'm also a yoga teacher. And I originally came from the East Coast, moved to Los Angeles. So I am kind of a recent, I love tacos. So just a little to share about myself. When I'm not teaching yoga, I am still practicing yoga and I love to craft. I'd love to have anyone share in the chat just where you're joining in from today. Love to see all the different places, or if you are in the LA area, like where location wise. Hello, Catherine, Darcy, Cara, or Kara, Denise. Awesome. Nice. Hi, Beth, Andrea. Wonderful. And it's so great to see familiar faces too. Whether you've connected me through the mindful movement classes, or I also connected with you through the last LADN event. Great, great. Well, hello, hello. And today we'll be talking about fatigue and how to manage fatigue. So there's four main pillars for this discussion today, and that is understanding where fatigue comes from, learning some nervous system regulation tools, and also exploring more strategies on how to manage fatigue, and also creating sustainable routines. Also, thank you all so much for any questions that you submitted. I'm hoping that in this presentation, the answers will kind of trickle in throughout the presentation, but I really appreciate taking the time to ask a few more questions. And I always like to give a little disclaimer when leading workshops. This is an hour-long workshop, and in this workshop, the expectations aren't to give specific medical advice. This is more to provide some general overview and education, and general recommendations for those of you having dysautonomia and also any other related conditions. And I put in quotes, but rules for class is to just be present, however you need to be. So maybe that's laying down, maybe that's turning the camera off, maybe you have a fur friend, a pet, or you have a loved one, a care partner who's also listening in. And this is recorded, so you always can pop in, pop out, whatever you need. And everyone with dysautonomia has their own story. So when we share together, be respectful and listen to one another. All right, so this is kind of a really broad question, but how do you all describe fatigue? You're welcome to unmute yourself or you can just say it in the chat. How do you describe what fatigue feels like?
Walking Dead.
Walking Dead, yeah. Andrea saying tired, drained, sleepy. Emily, body full
Blood
of
is being
sand.
drained.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Claire, what did you say?
Carol,
Oh,
like
Carol.
my blood is being drained.
Blood is being drained. Yes, the gravity. Pulling it down. Yes. Flu-like symptoms, says Annalisa. Yes. So what you all are describing are things that I hear lots of times in my practice. And yeah, Anna's also saying, oh yeah, a big wet towel has been put over me. Yes, yes, yes. So a lot of these things that you all are talking about are these physical signs of fatigue, right? It's like the body feeling heavy. Maybe you feel like you need to lay down. Sometimes you feel maybe dizzy, feel like passing out, things like that.
Hey,
And
not bad. How are you?
when we think about fatigue, fatigue definitely can be this physical manifestation, right? But fatigue can also
Absolutely.
be other things. In the EDS summit, it's the ECHO summit. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with that, but the EDS Society puts on this summit where it has a collaboration of all these different researchers and scientists that come together and share the latest research. But one graph that I found super interesting was thinking about fatigue as a whole and thinking about it more in a holistic sense. So when thinking about fatigue, this is specifically a diagram for EDS and hypermobility, but also this relates to things like other diagnoses, such as dysautonomia. But other than physical aspects of fatigue, fatigue can also be other things, such as it can be mental health wise, emotional fatigue. Fatigue can also be cognitive. If anyone has ever experienced brain fog here, or difficulty with memory, concentration, attention, fatigue can also be thought of as an environmental thing, thinking about your sensory system. So maybe some of you relate to feeling maybe like overwhelmed or overstimulated if you're in an environment that feels bright or loud or crowded, or just there's like a lot going on. Fatigue can also stem from hormonal changes. Maybe there's hormonal imbalances, as well as fatigue can stem from pain or gastrointestinal issues, or maybe there's nutrients deficiencies, such as dehydration, or maybe there's also things related to um, minerals and things like that. And fatigue can also relate to if you have other neurological diagnoses, such as like neurodivergence. And this next graph, I'm not gonna lie, it's so busy. So I apologize for anyone that has visual hyper motion sensitivity or anything like that. I won't go into all the nitty gritties of this diagram, but what I found to be super interesting about this diagram is Dr. Krutow was able to look at a bunch of chronic illnesses such as thinking about if you have an autoimmune illness or hypermobility spectrum disorder or EDS, if you have gastrointestinal issues, dysautonomia, and looking at how these chronic illnesses relate to one another in the symptoms and how these symptoms act as mechanisms that interplay with neuropsychiatric features. And neuropsychiatric features can be anywhere from the fatigue symptoms, or maybe if you are one that has some sensory sensitivities, being overwhelmed in the environment, as well as mental health things like mood disturbances or anxiety or feeling dysregulated, as well as neurocognitive issues or neurodivergence. So this diagram can be really helpful to be like, hey, there's a lot of things going on here that can be factors that impact fatigue. And if anyone has any questions too, you're more than welcome to chat away. All right. So another way to think about all of these different factors of what impacts fatigue is thinking more specifically, what are the depleting activities in your life? So depleting activities could be anywhere from thinking about the environment, like specific environments, like for instance, it could be like grocery stores increase fatigue, or it can be thinking about social situations like certain people in your life, or certain activities that you do. But the idea of a depleting activity is anything that either depletes your energy or reduces motivation or it increases your symptoms. Yeah, standing up. Yeah. I think Carol saying grocery stores are the worst. Medical appointments, physical work events. Yeah. Showering. Yes. The heat. Yes. Only about phone calls. Yeah. hmm Yeah. Any other examples? Decision making, yeah, running errands, loud crowds, driving. Yeah, travel in general. There's a lot of aspects of travel that can be quite fatiguing. Yes. Thank you all so much. These are really, really great examples. Another way to think about how to analyze your fatigue is also to analyze activities or behaviors that you do. You can kind of think of this as almost like personality types, but think about behaviors. So some of you may relate to this idea of being a boom and buster, or it is someone that does a lot of activities, right? Goes and goes and goes, and then thus the symptoms happen, or feeling just like a crash. Some of you may relate to being avoidance, meaning you don't want to increase symptoms or increase the fatigue. So instead, you avoid the activity or you cut some of the activities out. Excessive persistence is someone that, even though they have symptoms, um, they just keep on going because there might be obligations, social things, old habits, or maybe sometimes being worried about like saying no or their perception of others. I'm curious, does anybody relate to any of these types of activity behavior subtypes? Oh, yeah, that's a good point, Andrea. You don't need to fall into one, right? You might be a little bit of everything. Yeah, yeah. Now, can I see a show of hands or maybe like a nod? Who's heard of the spoon theory? I'm seeing I'm seeing some nods. Uh-huh, some thumbs up. Yeah. When thinking about pacing, the spoon theory is usually the number one thing that I will hear individuals with chronic illness talk about. For those that don't know what the spoon theory is, it is thinking of, let's call it an arbitrary number. You have 12 spoons, and the 12 spoons represent energy bars. And each activity that you do in the day represents a certain number of spoons or energy bars. Now, I feel like sometimes personally and professionally, I have a love-hate relationship with the spoon theory because oftentimes when someone tells me that they are a spoonie, that's meaning like you're using your spoons, um, they feel like, okay, well, I had 12 spoons and I used them up. I don't have any more spoons to give, right? Does anyone ever think about that with the spoon theory? Yeah, yeah. And when we talk about pacing in this sense today, what I really want to highlight today is how you can wash your spoons, meaning how can you find restorative activities to do so then you're not just using up spoons, but you're also finding ways on how to get your spoons back. Yeah, Zay is saying, I find it hard to gauge how many I have, which is why pacing can be tricky. Yeah, it can be hard because sometimes also when you think about the spoon theory, it's like taking your level of fatigue and quantifying it, where you might all experience fatigue can fluctuate. You might have spoons that take up 5 spoons, and then the next day you take up one, right? Yeah, it feels like algebra. I'm not a numbers person, so I agree with that, Becky. But not to like poo-poo the spoon theory. It's not that it's not a wonderful way to talk about fatigue. It's just there's can be other ways. Yeah. So when we think about ways to wash the spoons, this is thinking about ways that are more lifestyle based. So it's more thinking today about non-medicinal ways that we can restore our energy. And we're going to talk about these subtypes, meaning physical, cognitive, sensory, mindfulness or spirituality, and socio-emotional ways that we can restore or get back our spoons. All right, so physical rest. Physical rest could be something like you take a nap. I already heard some of you took a nap today. Yeah. Also, physical rest could be like untensing or relaxing your muscles. You can think of it as like, it could be like a progressive body muscle relaxation technique, or maybe focusing on relaxing a certain area of the body. Physical rest could also be laying down or sitting down, but not napping, not sleeping. Physical rest could also be a gentle stretch. It could be having a massage, like going to a masseuse, or maybe using a massage foam roller. Can anyone think of other ways to think about physical rest. Oh yeah, ice pads. That goes into some sensory too, but of course, some of these things might also intermix a little bit. Wonderful, wonderful. Um, oh yeah. Oh, I love that. Epsom salt bath. That's a great idea. Epsom salt bath. I'm gonna add like spa day. That could be a great physical rest. Love it, love it. Let's talk about mental rest. So mental rest is thinking about ways that can be more cognitively restorative versus depleting. Mental rest could be things like watching a movie or a TV show. Mental rest could be playing a video game, or maybe it's kind of mindlessly scrolling on your phone, or it could be watching something funny. It could also be light or easy reading, or like reading a magazine. Um, these are such great ideas. I love that, Beth. Noise canceling headphones, both physical and mental rest. Yeah. Can anyone think of anything more in terms of cognitive rest? Oh, I love that, Beverly. Nature breaks. Yep. Relaxing the sun. Yeah, sometimes screens can be depleting, which is why one person's restorative thing might be another person's depleting thing. Yeah, doing a craft, that's really wonderful. Yeah. With mental rest, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not thinking. It might mean you're switching the cognitive task so it doesn't feel so overloading. Sometimes, like I've had some clients say when they just learn something new, like learning a language, even though learning a language can, of course, be hard, it's just so different than what their normal cognitive activities are that it's more like a cognitive switch. Oh, I love that. A jigsaw puzzle. Love that. Wonderful. These are so great. And some of these all really overlap in a wonderful way together. So you all are alluding to this already, but sensory rest. Sensory is, oh, I think someone said something. All right. Sensory is one of my favorite topics as an occupational therapist, but in our sensory system, we all have a sensory system. We all have things that can make us feel calm. We all have things that can make us feel energized. And we also have things that can irritate us, maybe make us feel alarmed. So, when thinking about these activities that might be depleting, knowing for you your own sensory system, what could be a recharge? So these are some examples of some sensory rest activities. One is fidgets. I have a fidget right now. I love this little squishy guy. But fidgets can be a wonderful way of kind of like doing something tactilely with your hands to help you to focus more or give you a little bit of energy. Getting cozy, like wrapping up in a warm blanket, or it could be a cooling blanket. Um, Headphones, which was already mentioned before, that could be great. Headphones could be noise canceling, or maybe it's putting on music that you find relaxing, like calming music, or it also could be energizing music. Essential oils can also be really lovely. A smell that feels comforting, a smell that can feel calming. Also thinking of visual sensory. So maybe it's dimming the lights or warm light, or sometimes folks will put on shaded glasses or things like Theraspecs if they're out and about and it's a very bright place or really fluorescent lighting. Um, Other types of tactile input could be holding a smooth stone, or if anyone has held like a skipping rock in their hands and just felt the smoothness of the rock. Other sensory could be thinking about orally. So a cold beverage, or maybe a warm beverage, or maybe a bubbly beverage, just something that changes the scent, the flavor in the mouth as well as the input. Cooling objects also can be really great, especially in this heat. Andrea, yeah, ice cream. Yes, ice cream. Popsicles. Love that. Love that. Um, Other cooling things, I think I saw ice pack earlier too. Pretty sure. Yes. Oh, great. Anna's saying FL41 pink lenses help so much with fluorescent lighting. Yes. That's also really, I love that you're saying that, Anna, because visually grounding can be different for different folks. So that might be something to play around with. Some people like a yellow tint. Some people like a warm rosy tint. Some people like more purplish bluish. So it really depends on the person what feels grounding. Yes. Alicia's saying, I learned I'm a tactile person. I'm right there with you. Wonderful. Kelly, will all of these amazing suggestions be collected somewhere? Yes. What I'm going to do is I'll save this meeting chat just for the sake of time. So then we can compile a list of suggestions. I'm also going to be giving a handout. So it'll all be compiled. But if you'd like to take notes, you're more than welcome. But these slides are also going to be shared. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't worry about it. All right. Mindfulness grounding techniques. I find it quite helpful to do some of these mindfulness grounding techniques together for practice. And if any of you have come to the mindful movement class, you might be familiar with some of them. Let's try a few, okay? Let's try palming together. You can do it with both hands, or maybe you do it with one hand, or you rub your hands together, kind of like crinkling the fingers. But let's take hands and rub them together. And you're building a little bit of heat, a little bit of friction. And you'll take a breath here, breathing in. And on your exhale, you'll cup your hands over your eyes and breathe out. You can keep your vision occluded and take a couple rounds of breath here, inhaling through the nose and exhaling out. Continuing to slow down the breath, letting maybe your head sink into your hands, tilting your gaze down. Take one more round here, breathing in. And on your exhale, you'll gently take your hands from your face, slowly blink the eyes open, and just take a moment, keeping the gaze soft, to look around your space. And I invite you to find 3 things in your space that are a bumpy texture, or maybe it's like a rough texture. You can say it in your head, or you're muted, so you can say it out loud. Once you found at least one thing that is bumpy, I invite you to touch 3 things in your space that are near you. And as you're touching these objects, maybe you're noticing the texture, the temperature, maybe visually the color. And once you've found 3 objects, maybe you take a moment and you either press your feet into the floor, or maybe you press your palms onto your seat or on your lap, feeling the texture or maybe feeling the weight. And we'll take a couple rounds of breath together. As you breathe, you'll inhale for a count of 4, and then we'll exhale for a count of 6. So this is an extended exhale. If this breathing technique feels too long or too short, you're also welcome to breathe however feels most comfortable for you. But we'll take 3 rounds of breath here to try it out together. So we'll take an inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for a beat. Exhale out. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. hold, exhale, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One more. Inhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold, exhale, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If your eyes are closed or you're keeping that soft gaze, just blink them open, come back to the space. And I'm curious, we just tried a few different mindfulness techniques. Some of you may have practiced these before, but curious, any thoughts about it? Just taking a little pause and just saying relaxing. Wonderful. Ah, getting a heart, calming. Love it. Love it. Wonderful. Thanks for love the palming. Nice leash. Wonderful. So there's so many different ways to explore mindfulness and grounding. But one thing I love to emphasize here is mindfulness doesn't mean you are sitting for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20, whatever. In terms of meditation, sometimes that can be rather difficult, especially if the mind is very busy. I call it like the monkey mind. You're like ping ponging, or it just feels uncomfortable to be in the body, right? Sometimes mindfulness can be too much of an internal focus, meaning it starts to send more attention or awareness on the things that do not feel well. If that is the case for you, listen to that, because if you keep on sending signals to the brain that this is how you have to be, right? You have to like zone in on all these things that do not feel well, right? That just keeps on sending the imprint in the brain to focus on them. So the ways that we practice mindfulness today were specifically external focus ways, meaning it's things that are more related to outside of the body than inside the body, which can sometimes be a little bit more calming, a little bit more grounding than zoning in like a body scan. There's a time and a place for everything. Some people here might love a body scan, right? But these are a couple other ideas that you can try. Last but not least, social emotional. So, social emotional rest could be things that just kind of make you feel like nice. It can be self compassion work, such as thinking about the things that you are thankful for, or maybe thinking about the wins, meaning like if you're finding things to be progress or just little glimpses of like joy in the day. Social emotional rest could also be calling a loved one, a friend, someone that feels regulating to you versus dysregulating. It could be watching your favorite comfort show, or it also could be like an audiobook, a podcast, a movie. It could be snuggling with a pet. It could be giving yourself a treat, like a yummy snack, a drink. Sometimes social emotional rest is alone time, right? Sometimes the social battery is just like really, really high, and a treat to yourself is just not being in these social situations. Does anyone have any other ideas of what could be social emotional rest? Reading. Love that. Beverly says, gratitude meditation for people in my life. Wonderful. Ah, candle, fireplace, puzzle. I want to do all those things right now. Yes, just being comfy, right? I am so happy athleisure is what's in style these days. It's so good. Yes, comfy clothes for the win. Yeah, I love that. Playing a simple board game or video game with someone. Love it. So we've thought about what are your depleting activities, and we also thought about what are things that are restorative. Now let's put it all together to synthesize and how it can play into your daily routine. In terms of pacing, I feel that probably most people here are familiar with what pacing is, meaning taking breaks. But one thing that I want to emphasize here is that pacing doesn't mean that you're limiting your activities, meaning that the spoons are done and you can't go on. Pacing can be a way that is about facilitating activity, not limiting it. Um, the diagram to your left is this chart where if you look at the x-axis, that is the time of day. So you can think of, say, the beginning of the line is the morning, and then the end goes to the evening. And then on the y-axis, you can think of symptoms that you might have, as well as fatigue level. The dotted line in the middle is the threshold. The threshold meaning this is how much you can tolerate before symptoms start to exacerbate, or specifically the fatigue. When we're looking at pacing here, we're thinking about ways that we can continue to manage the day, but not go above the threshold, meaning the dotted line. And thinking about not going past the dotted line, you can kind of see here that when someone might not be pacing as much in the day, this orange line goes like it goes really, really high and it goes above the threshold. When someone gets to that like big hump in the orange without pacing, that means that they're dealing with this much room where they are managing symptoms. So if someone's not pacing, they're way, way, way above their threshold. And then they're dealing with a lot of symptoms because they haven't paced in the day. If you start to pace at the beginning of the day, say like at the beginning of the chart where the line is really much below the threshold, then when you're managing tools and using pacing, you're only dealing with a low amount of fatigue exacerbation. If you can keep on pacing below this fatigue threshold level, then the idea of pacing is how can we stay below the level and think of it more as a prevention. This other picture here is a frog because sometimes we can think about pacing like thinking about a frog jumping across a pond. One of my OT colleagues, Malia Sacco, she is wonderful. She thought of this analogy and I just love it. But it's this idea of like if a frog is crossing over a pond, the frog doesn't jump all the way across the frog. The frog doesn't jump all the way across the pond. The frog jumps between lily pads. So, how do we all do this, right? How do we pace? Early intervention of strategies is more effective, as I was saying earlier, than doing strategies when symptoms are more elevated. I will say that is the hardest time to pace, is to think of pacing when you don't feel like you need to, right? Because then it just feels like you want to keep going. And, oftentimes I'll hear people say, when I'm feeling good, I just want to maximize the day because I know it's hard for me to do things when I'm not feeling well. Do you all relate to that? Yeah, I'm seeing some nods. We're going to go through multiple different ways of pacing today. You don't have to do all of these at once. These are ideas, right? Maybe you take one nugget from today and you try it out. But one of the ways that can be helpful for pacing is, oh, my thing went to the other. One second, try and just go back. Maybe I'll exit out. Are you all seeing the presentation still?
We're seeing micro pacing.
Okay. It is not letting me go back, but I'm just going to explain the slide.
Can you try using
But-
arrows on the keyboard instead of the mouse?
That's what I'm using.
Oh. Well,
Hmm.
maybe click the.
One second. Oh, there we go. Cool.
Yay.
All right. So in early intervention, there are two types of pacing strategies. One is called meso pacing, which means you're planning breaks throughout the day. You're looking at your day and all the activities and thinking about what are your depleting activities that you have, and how can you find pockets of time to do restorative tasks? Macro pacing is thinking about pacing during your week or your month. So it could be looking at your calendar, thinking in general, what are the activities that you're doing throughout your week or your month, and planning restorative activities throughout the events in your life. Micro pacing is also, I like to call it like a pacing snack. So it is taking short breaks or doing a restorative pacing task while also doing something else. So, example, I have a fidget and I also have a cold mug of water because these are things that help me to stay engaged and they help me to stay focused and energized to talk to you all. Both macro, meso, meaning these like meals, bigger chunks of restorative activities, as well as snacks are important. And you might find that one type of strategy works better for certain situations than the other. So just to break down a little, what is micro pacing? Micro pacing is thinking of taking a task and almost taking check-ins hourly. So the blue is the activity and the green is thinking about the check-in. This could be looking at, say, like if you are working and you're at your computer, maybe it's like setting a timer for every 30 minutes just to do a check-in to do some palming, right? Or maybe it is to use a fidget or a worry stone, something like that. And it's a way of being able to check in to see, hey, where are my symptoms at? Did my symptoms start to increase a little bit? Did they stay the same? Because sometimes you might do something and you're feeling really good while you're doing it. So then you just keep going, 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 right? You don't stop. So that's what micro pacing is. This is what meso pacing looks like, the daily pacing. So an example is you're looking at your day, maybe it's hourly, maybe you're splitting up the day between morning, afternoon, and evening. And you're looking at what are the activities that you have to do in the day, and then penciling in where could the rest be. Because sometimes, I don't know about you, but like the day can just kind of like run away, right? So sometimes it can be helpful to have a structure when planning your day out because it's also a way of thinking of like, what's my intention for the day? How can I keep myself checked? Macro pacing, this is an example. It is, you can use a calendar or a planner, something like that. And it's thinking of some of the main big activities that you have during your week, and then thinking about how to plan what can work, what could be restorative. So, for instance, grocery shopping and food prep could be on a Sunday, or for someone, maybe it's grocery shopping, or maybe the task is making the grocery shopping list, right? That can be alone a very cognitive task to do. And then thinking about where can you plan the rest? Also thinking more specifically, what is the rest, right? So maybe rest for you is like if the day is very much a physically energy draining day, then you want to plan a physical energy restorative activity. Or if it's a mental activity, maybe the switch is do a physical restorative activity, right? Maybe you don't want to think anymore, even if it's a restorative thinking task. Maybe the idea is take a sensory task or take a physical task when you've done a lot of mental activity. Just checking the chat here. Oh yeah, Katrina's saying pacing for me includes carefully plotting out medical appointments, errands, outings. Yes, too much in one day or 1 week tends to be specific. Ugh, can't talk, especially problematic for me. Yeah, yeah. I think that others can definitely relate to that. Yeah. So to speak about a packing snack, we're going to circle back here. But when thinking about how to pace in the moment, particularly if you are pacing in a community activity or a social activity, it can be quite hard in the moment on how do you plan that, right? In the moment when you are with other people specifically, or just out and about. One way that can help to be able to implement some micro pacing is putting together a toolkit or putting together a few items that maybe are either sensory regulating, that you can have on hand. Either it's in like a small backpack or it's in like a crossbody pouch, something that is easy to carry and kind of just can be like tools on the go. Does anyone have like a sensory toolkit already, or have things that they carry out into the community that helps to regulate or energize you? Great. Andrea says, I bring a few things. Oh, a thermos. Yes. Let's think of some ideas together for a toolkit, especially if this might be kind of a new concept. Electrolytes, snacks, migraine stick, sunglasses, earplugs, fold pack. Oh, yeah, gum. That's a great one. Water. Yes. Neck pillow. Love it. A fan. Yeah, a fan could be like a neck fan. A fan could be a handheld fan. A hand sanitizer. Honestly, too, hand sanitizer itself, it's cooling, right? Like when you put it on, kind of gives a nice tactile feel for some people. Oh, Coolie Bar clothes. I don't know that brand. I'm gonna have to look that up. This is why I love these types of webinars, because we all can teach each other things. A note in my phone with some, oh, I love that. Yeah. Breathwork notes, compression. Mhm. Wonderful. Yeah. I'm also going to put like hat or like SPF protection. And oh, yes, ginger chews. That can be great for nausea. Um, and in terms of having a sensory toolkit, it could be having a bag or like some kind of crossbody to carry. Sometimes I like to call it like toolkit stations, because sometimes you just got a lot of stuff and it can get a little overwhelming in itself. So it could be maybe like a place in your car to carry some things, a place in your living room, a place in your bedroom. Oh yeah, bombas. Yeah, those are great compression socks. Does anyone also do other compressions, such as like abdominal compression? Yeah. Particularly for those of you that have POTS, abdominal compression is really wonderful. I'm going to put in quotes like hierarchy of compression, abdominal compression is the best. Yes, Melanie's actually making a good point too. If it's not, if it's not too hot. Yeah, so if you are wearing compression, think about what are some cooling objects you can also bring, because compression around the abdominal, yeah, can unfortunately get hot too. Okay, yeah. Uh, Joe is saying, I really want to try abdominal compression, but not sure where to start. Sensory-wise compression socks, oops, have been a nightmare. Mm. I don't know if you all know of this podcast. It's called Potscast, I think. I'm gonna have to look this up, but she is an individual who has POTS, and she has a lot of different people that come on her podcast and talk about different strategies. But she says that finding the right compression is like finding kissing the frog and getting the prince. So just keep that in mind. Just like all of these tools, what works for someone might not work for somebody else. These are more kind of like general rules of thumb. But I will say, don't give up because there are different mercury meaning like different compression sizing, that might work for you. We've already done a bit of brainstorming here. I'm also giving a handout for you all to think of these things on your own. But one thing that could be helpful for you to do when you're synthesizing all this information is to think, what are some activities that are restorative that could be the longer breaks? And what are activities that could be more the snacks, meaning the activities that would be more helpful for you to do in a short break or to do during the task. And also, you might also see where they might kind of intermix, could be either. Because in the moment when you are feeling the symptoms, um, it can be quite hard to think of what is the best thing to use. Because if the brain fog or like, there could be some cognitive um, difficulties in the moment when you're feeling symptoms. And similarly, if you're not feeling symptoms, if you're feeling relatively like well when you're doing an activity, it also can be hard to think, what can I do when I'm using the task? Because you all are experts of yourselves, right? I have a strong sense that there are quite a few strategies that you might know how to use, but it's more of how to use them more consistently and to use them at the times when it's hardest to think about using them. Yeah, Becky, there are, you can also use disposable ice packs too. Those are really wonderful. So then you don't have to bring like a lunchbox. Some people use a lunchbox too as their like sensory toolkit bag. Yeah, these are great ideas. So as I was alluding to earlier, casing can change daily, right? There might be times when you're feeling really well, feeling more energetic, and other days where you don't feel well, or sometimes it can just kind of like hit you, right? Where all of a sudden you're like, what the heck? I'm down for the count. So to keep that in mind, casing also implies having adaptability. There are a couple of ways to think about how to plan for your days. One thing that can be quite helpful is thinking about energy trends. The top diagram is a chart. I apologize, it's a little small, but if you feel like you have some common patterns of where your fatigue lies, you can almost make like a map to think about your day. So for instance, if you're looking at the x-axis, this is the time of day, so it goes from morning to evening. And then you can find different colors, such as where is your physical energy? Does it go up and down? Does it feel less in the morning, more later on in the day? As well as breaking down cognitive energy, emotional energy, and sensory energy. And if you are able to map out just kind of some general patterns, that might help to think of, hey, where can I add something specific like a sensory restorative activity? Or where might it be more beneficial if, say, my cognitive energy is down to almost a zero at 7 p.m.? Maybe I'm not going to do my taxes, right? So it's a way to look at trends. Also, another way to plan for energy management strategies is thinking about different plans for different days. Um, this was a really fun idea. I'm just shouting out one of my great colleagues, Malia Sacco again. She had a really awesome energy trend graph with one of her clients, and I was like, I'm gonna steal it. It's so good. But you can see that these are Olivia Rodriguez. Hope I'm saying her name right. But she chose different songs, this client, and of the three songs, there were times where she feels really, really low energy, really depleted, high symptom day. To the middle, this is how she feels when she's medium symptom day or medium level of energy. And then on a day where she feels high energy. And then taking that into account, what sensory tools or what activities that would be restorative for that day. So that's another way you can think of how to plan for different days. Let me just take a look in the chat here. Any questions? Yeah, the Visible app, Anna, that can be a really wonderful app to help to like log symptoms and also for pacing. Body braid, yes, body braid is wonderful. It's a way of adding some input to the body. Yeah, and less heat. You all have such great ideas.
And I also wanted to point out a
Yeah.
question that was earlier in the
Mhm.
chat.
Yeah,
Kelly said, these tools and strategies are so fantastic, but I really struggle with balancing the cognitive load and energy, time management, and planning required when you have multiple chronic conditions, a list of meds to manage and take, med, hospital admin, da 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 da. How do we bridge the gap between intention and implementation?
yes. It can be quite overwhelming to think of all these different strategies. Take it in bite size. You can even like take a lick using a strategy. For instance, you could break down taking, say, the sensory restorative activities and choose one to try in the day. Just see how it works. Or you can also take one concept of what we're talking about in terms of some pacing strategies, such as maybe you plan for one break in the day, or you look at the macro level of your week and you start a pacing strategy planning like that. It can be quite overwhelming. And one thing that's really great is that this community I've seen this whole past year has so many ideas and tools and things that people can share with one another. But of all of these strategies, my recommendation is choose one to try. Because, yeah, if you look at the whole thing, it's like, holy moly, this is just a cognitive task altogether. So sometimes I like to say, go with your gut. If there's one thing that really resonates with you today, just stick to one thing. Um, that also, I'll show you the handout that I'm going to give to you all today, because that's also going to help to break up some of this information. So I'll show you all in just a moment. Was that helpful to answer? And we're getting to that. That's one, you're reading my mind. That'll be the next slide. All right. Whoops. Oh, so actually, this goes back to Kelly, your question. When it gets just so overwhelming thinking about different pacing strategies, I love to think of the pacing sandwich. This can be a really nice pattern to just think about with one depleting activity at a time. So take one activity from the depleting activities that we talked about earlier and think about what is a restorative activity that you can do before the task. And then during the activity, what are some restorative snacks or things that you can do during the task? And then after, what is a restorative activity that you can do? Or also thinking about how can you take your nervous system and intentionally bring it back down to baseline. So this is a really nice pattern because it's kind of easy to think about, just like thinking restorative snack or restorative sandwich, meaning what do you do before, what do you do during, and what do you do after? So that could also be a really nice place to start to try these things. I'm going to skip this because I'm going to talk about the handout in another slide. But I do want to talk about some pacing final thoughts as we're wrapping up here. And in terms of pacing final thoughts, it's a lot, right? It's a lot to think about pacing, to think about conceptualizing pacing. But I welcome you all to just be reflective when you're pacing, meaning as you're trying some of these new methods, what are some things that you might have tried? How did you respond? And what tools worked? And also what maybe could be something that you change for next time. Other types of things to think about too when planning pacing is thinking about how can you adapt or modify a task, meaning shorter rest breaks or stopping, or maybe prioritization. How important is the task? Or can the task be done later if there's a whole laundry list of other things to do? Activity shifting is also another way that you can think about modifying a task. So say you need to do your taxes, but you also need to do your laundry. One is a very cognitive heavy task. One is more maybe a physical task. So thinking about the time of day and thinking about where your energy is, maybe you switch the task and you do more of the physical activity first. Also, maybe you're not alone, right? Can you get somebody to help? Can you get someone to do some of it for you or delegate the task? And in terms of someone asked about reminders, how it can be kind of hard to initiate all this in the first place. External cues or reminders can be so helpful. So you can think of maybe if you're trying out some of these new pacing techniques, like checking in during a task, you set a timer for every 20 minutes to just do a little check-in. Or you write a sticky note like slow down or pacing sandwich, right? Maybe you put pacing sandwich on your fridge to remind you whenever you're doing kitchen stuff. Or maybe you have an accountability buddy. Maybe you all can be each other's accountability buddy as you try some of these new things. And I do want to let me stop sharing just for a second. And share this worksheet that you all will have. I'll send it out later. So this is a fatigue management worksheet. Can you all see it? Yeah, okay. And this is a way of kind of breaking down all the stuff we just talked about. So first, it's thinking about analyzing where does your fatigue come from? So you can add, you can cross out, you can change any part of this pie, but it can be helpful to understand, yeah, where does your fatigue lie? What are the things that might be draining it? And then listing what are your specific depleting activities, meaning what are the specific activities or people in your life, conversations, sensory things that are depleting for you. And I got to fix this, but this is a table and it's breaking down underlying what are your physical restorative activities, what are your cognitive activities, and social emotional, and then spiritual and mindfulness activities. So it's a way to break down all these different restorative activities that we just talked about in a table for you. And then thinking about a pacing plan. So maybe you start off with one activity, let's call it cooking. And you can think of, well, what type of energy does this take, right? Is it a physical energy? Is it emotional? Is it cognitive? Where does this fatigue lie? And then maybe thinking about energy trends, meaning when cooking, would it be better to do it as a meal prep in the middle of the day, the beginning of the day, or what to do when you're having a day that's more low energy, middle energy, or higher energy? As well as thinking about those pacing meals. What are those larger breaks that could be helpful for cooking or pacing snacks? What are restorative activities that you can do during cooking? And then planning ahead. How are you going to plan these bigger chunks of rest breaks? Or how are you going to plan ahead these smaller breaks? You also can think about cooking with a pacing sandwich, meaning what do you do before the task? What do you do during the task? And what do you do after? And then additional strategies, what we just were talking about. Can you adapt the task? Can you modify? Can you do an activity shift? What's a reminder you can use? And then those general pacing reflections at the end. How did cooking go trying one of these tools? This isn't something where you have to fill out every single part of this worksheet by any means. You can pick one part of the strategies and fill it out. But it's a way of kind of conceptualize and bringing it all together, all the different things we just talked about today. And let me go back to the presentation. I know we're running a little bit out of time, but I just wanted to say thank you all for being here, for being like sharing ideas. It's been so awesome to lead this workshop with you all. And if you want to learn more about how occupational therapy or yoga services that I provide can help with different aspects of your life. I specifically specialize in working with individuals with dysautonomia. So I'm giving you a lot of information here, but in a private session, we really break things down more and cater to your individual needs. And it can be anywhere from things like working on fatigue management, or maybe it's working on strategies for school, for work, for your daily self-cares like bathing. I know showering can be very depleting for a lot of people here, as well as interweaving concepts of mindfulness with my yoga background and ways to move more easily in your environment, as well as other lifestyle needs. So if you want to reach out to me, you can email me, you can find me on Instagram. But you've all been so lovely. Um, I know we have run out of time, but I can stick around for any comments or some questions for a couple minutes, if that's all right with everybody.
That sounds great. And Lian, thank you so much for the time and the care you put into today. It was a really wonderful workshop with lots of really useful information. And great, you put your email in the chat there. Also wanted to mention, I put in the chat a link to today's mindful movement class, which happens at 5 o'clock. So if you want to join us again and put some of this into practice, I hope you will sign up. I also put in the link for right now we're collecting responses for our healthcare practitioner and our health tool recommendations. We talked a lot about different tools that we all use for, restoring these. I love the idea of washing spoons. So if you're inspired by the talk and you want to add them to our rec list, I put the link for that in there as well. Yeah, does anyone have any questions for Lian? Looks like Becky has a question in addition.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Go ahead.
I can read, I can kind of summarize. So Becky, you're talking about how even when you're planning or you're managing your strategies, what can be most difficult is communicating those needs and justifying, making the case for people. How do I know? Who do I know how? Sorry, trying to read. Okay, why I would need these breaks in the first place are resentful when I avoid draining activities. Yeah, I think other people can relate to this in terms of communicating and advocating. That could be a whole webinar in itself, how to advocate. But do you remember that semi-complicated graph I showed earlier about the interwoven aspects of chronic illness and symptoms and how it relates to fatigue and other types of neurological symptoms? It's kind of a complicated graph, but it could be helpful to take another look at it, because one thing I find about that graph in particular, it's a really great way to break down how fatigue is so multifactorial. And that's the thing that can be quite hard for people who do not experience chronic illness to realize, because oftentimes, it can be this like invisible illness. But there are so many layers, there's so many ways that the different diagnoses that someone might has interweaves with fatigue. So it can be quite helpful to kind of show like a diagram of how, like, hey, look at this is very chaotic. This is what I'm dealing with. Another thing too, in terms of communicating things that can be hard with loved ones or just people about symptoms, is going back to washing spoons, thinking about what are the social, emotional, restorative activities, or maybe mindfulness. What are the mindfulness activities that you can do? And you can take that concept and use maybe pacing sandwich. Like, I'm going to have a conversation that drives me bonkers, or it's really difficult, right? What can I do to regulate myself? Because sometimes in these moments, that's all you may have control over, versus thinking of how someone is going to perceive what you're saying. So how can I do the work to regulate myself in these conversations that are so hard? Oh, thank you so much, Joy. Oh, okay. Anna is saying the book, Laziness Does Not Exist. Oops. Well, cured my 40 years of shame about not being productive enough. Oh, okay. I'm gonna write that down. Cool. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if you all say like I should do this, I should do that, but someone just said to me recently, um, should is a could smeared with shame. And I loved it because there is a lot of like, I should do this, right? Society is telling me I should do this, I should be better, all this stuff. But no more shitting on yourself. Yeah, Beverly and Becky, protecting your boundaries, right? Maybe it's not, it's protecting your social emotional boundary, how much you talk about what you're going through and who are the people you talk about it with, because you don't owe everyone all of your information. Yeah, Leash, the activities, right? Because I feel like the common thing that I hear about pacing is I just got to stop things. It means I can't do things. It means I have to limit myself. And that's not the case.
That's such a positive way of looking at it. It's like caring for ourselves is adding to our lives instead of restricting.
Yeah. Yay. I'm glad I'm seeing some excitement here.
Yeah, this has been absolutely wonderful. Does anyone have any
Awesome.
other last questions, or shall we all return to our lives and with excitement about the new activities and awesome things that we can do to wash our spoons? Okay. Well, Leanne, thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in a few hours for some mindful movement.
Oh, yes. 5 o'clock. Sally, can I stay on with you just for a moment?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.